Letters PS for Priory of Zion. St. Sulpice Church has that 33-foot obelisk up inside of it that represents the Antichrist, or the phallus of the Antichrist. And St. Sulpice was always known for these priests coming in there, and they were always mingling Roman Catholic doctrine with occult. And so undoubtedly he learned a lot of his occult tendencies and his cult ideas from his years in St. Sulpice. He was into necromancy. He wrote a book called Dogma and Ritual of High Magic. He also wrote Transcendental Magic and a bunch of other books. Some of the symbols that we see in the occult world and in Freemasonry came from Eliphas Levi's books, and even some of the concepts, in fact most of the concepts, came from Eliphas Levi. Now here's the thing. Eliphas Levi was also one of these guys, although being trained by these priests and these occultists all throughout France, we also know that he received divine illumination. He received, or he made contact with, a familiar spirit. This picture you see up on the screen shows 33rd degree Freemason Eliphas Levi standing inside a specially created circle, and he's conjuring up the demon spirit Apollonius of Tyana. Now Apollonius of Tyana was somebody around the 3rd century AD after Christ that was doing alchemy and magic before anybody else was. And Eliphas Levi summoned a familiar spirit, not the actually dead guy himself, but a familiar spirit that was masquerading, sort of like Saul did with the Witch of Endor, masquerading as this 3rd century occultist. Anyway, here's the interesting part. I want you to notice the symbol that this spirit Apollonius is standing in. Now, Apollonius, that name itself, seems to me comes from the book of Revelation, chapter 9, verse 11, 9:11. And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon. That's the name for the king of the bottomless pit, or the lost word of Freemasonry, or Hermes Trismegistus, or the Antichrist, the beast that will rise up out of the pit and take control of planet Earth. But I want you to notice this little emblem that this spirit is conjured up in, a triangle inside of a circle. Often you'll see that same symbol in Freemasonry. Here it is inside of a tapestry in the Vatican. Notice the snake with its tail in its mouth. That is called the Ouroboros, and that is described as the tail represents the male, the mouth open represents the female. It's a symbol of eternal life or immortality or godhood. And here in the Ouroboros we have the fusion of two opposites, male and female, joined together to create the divine man. There was a book written by Maurice Nicoll back several years ago. It was about the evolutionary stages of man and about how man is going to go on into his next phase of evolution. That book was called The Mark. But let's go back to this image now of this creature, or this familiar spirit that Eliphas Levi conjured up. Take a look at him. He looks an awful lot like this guy. Yeah, I think so. Anyway, Eliphas Levi went on to write a book called Dogmas and Rituals of High Magic, and he spent 22 chapters in this book dealing with the tarot card, the major arcana of the tarot card. And he's the one that conceptualized this idea that the 22 major arcana, or the major cards, or the great secrets that is inside the tarot card system, actually represent the 22 Hebrew letters. Now, you and I both know now that those 22 Hebrew letters make up the DNA book that is inside of the cells of you and I. Those 22 Hebrew letters are the 22 amino acids that form the words that make up our book of DNA. Remember, David said, "In thy book all my members were written." He was describing DNA. So here we have the whole tarot card system being a revelation of the secret. So here we have Eliphas Levi, who was inspired by the spirits that were at St. Sulpice, who conjured up a demon who writes about the tarot card and the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And now here we have everybody using divination by tarot cards. You see how the Tower of Babel keeps getting higher and higher with every one of these guys that are coming along. It was Eliphas Levi who also drew the caricature of what we now know as Baphomet. Take a look at Baphomet. He is a part beast and a part man, showing the mingling of the two seeds. His arms, as above, so below. The three fingers pointing upward, two downward, as above, so below. He has written on his forearms, Salve and Coagula. That is actually the process in alchemy of turning lead into gold, or a man into a god. You must dissolve first, purify with fire, and then coagulate together. That is the process known as the Hegelian process. It is a process, and Hegel was a student of this idea, this concept, is that you have to tear down first before you can bring in a new. Before a new world order can exist, you must destroy the old world order. This is exactly, I believe, the days that we're living in right now. We're about to see the birth of a new world order, not only in this country, but in the whole world, because we're seeing the destruction, the dissolving, and the tearing down of the old world systems. And one of those systems, in fact, the basis of all that, is this Bible right here. The destruction of the Word of God, not only in our country and our civil society, but in the church. It's being dissolved right now so a new world order can come into its place. We see also that Baphomet has the five-pointed star, or the pentagram, showing Lucifer's plan. We also see that symbol. He has male and female parts. And we also see Eliphas Levi drew the DNA symbol as a picture of Baphomet, or the divine man, or the fusion of the opposites together in one body. He drew the image of DNA. How did he get that idea? How did he get that image? By inspiration, by reception from familiar spirits. Now, let's take a look at one of the spookiest guys that we're going to deal with. I mean, just look at his eyes here. Ugh. This guy is scary. Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley was actually born in the same year that Eliphas Levi died. And Aleister Crowley believed that he was the reincarnation of Eliphas Levi. So I'm sure he studied all of his works and ritual magic and all that. I mean, so he knew all of these things. Funny thing about Aleister Crowley, and we're going to talk a little bit more about him than we have some of these others. Aleister Crowley is actually has become one of the most influential people, although he's been dead for some time now, in American media. His reach and his philosophy and his concepts have reached far into the music industry, and I'm going to show you some examples of that here in a little bit. But Aleister Crowley was, I mean, this guy was wicked. And really, from the research I did, what got him started in the occult world was, and I don't know exactly how to describe it, but at a young age he had a sexual experience with another male. And from that point forward, he was like demon possessed. I mean, the devils were operating all inside of this guy. He was definitely in contact with familiar spirits. In fact, there's one in particular that I'm going to show you about that's really, really interesting, that plays into some things that we're seeing right now here in this world. But Aleister Crowley became a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. This is linked with Hermeticism and Rosicrucianism and alchemy and scrying, and so he was doing all of these things. But apparently the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn just wasn't wicked enough for Aleister Crowley. So he left that group, or maybe they kicked him out, and he formed a group called the AA. Now, I don't think that means Alcoholics Anonymous. But anyway, although that's what Crowley was into. In fact, Crowley was into drugs, alcohol, perversions. I mean, drinking blood. I mean, you name it. That's the kind of guy Aleister Crowley was. He was so wicked that in his day, newspaper articles were being written about him, calling him the Beast 666. I mean, that's who this guy was. So apparently the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was not evil enough for him, so he formed a group called the AA. Now it has two names, Argentum Astrum, which means silver star, or Arcanum Arcanorum, which means the secret of all secrets. So everything that Aleister Crowley did had something to do with this secret that we've been talking about. The secrets the Freemasons have, the occultists have, the New Agers have, the coming New World Order, the fusion of man's DNA and all this stuff. Everything that Crowley did had everything to do with this concept. Notice the symbol of the AA, Argentum Astrum, or the Arcanum Arcanorum. You have the seal that John Dee came up with, that 7-pointed seal, and inside the points of that seal you have the word Babylon. Now this is an alternate spelling for Babylon, which is Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. I want you to notice that even inside this symbol you have the mandorla, which is a representation of the sacred feminine, which represents the spirit that was guiding Aleister Crowley, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. After this, he formed Ordo Templi Orientalis, or the Order of the Eastern Temple. Now this concept, or this sort of group, or this mystic occult church thing that he was doing, was built upon this concept of the triads, which is, remember, is the monad added to the duad, or the 2 points, the 2 bottom points of a pyramid, and the unfinished pyramid, and the illuminated eye capstone at the top of that. That is the basis for this Ordo Templi Orientalis. Now remember, this unfinished pyramid represents 2-strand DNA. The capstone at the top of it represents the illumination. Remember, all these guys are receiving illumination. The eye at the top of the capstone represents the spirit of Antichrist, or the lost word, being added to those 2 parts. So the duad, and then you have the monad added to it. You also have that symbol of a pyramid. Here also is the symbol of the OTO, and I want you to notice here again we have the mandorla, which is the sacred feminine, or Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots. We have the symbol of the dove. We have the symbol of the chalice, which is the Holy Grail, and the Templar cross, which represents the X chromosome. And then inside that pyramid figure there, or that triangle figure there, you have the illuminated eye, which is the same illuminated eye you see on the back of the dollar bill, the same illuminated eye that Freemasons put upon their apron. It's the same divining spirit, the same familiar spirit that has illuminated all of these followers that we have talked about so far in this video, including the master of them all, Aleister Crowley. Now take a look at this guy here. In 1918, Aleister Crowley came in contact, he conjured a familiar spirit, a devil, a demon, by the name of Lamb. What does this look like to you? Well, yeah, it looks like that. This whole concept that aliens are visiting planet Earth, and that one of these days the aliens are going to come down and bring us light, that's all right out of the Bible. Daniel chapter 2, that was the vision that Nebuchadnezzar had, is that that 4th kingdom is going to come down and they're going to mingle themselves with the seed of men. I mean, stop and think about this whole UFO movement thing. They're all talking about alien abductions and how they're trying to create hybrids and do all of these things. And this whole concept, I think, of the image or the appearance of these aliens came from Aleister Crowley's vision of this devil called Lamb. It was this same imagery that was the inspiration, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, directed by Steven Spielberg. Notice the clip. Now remember, Close Encounters is about the aliens are going to come down and bring us all a new age or a new enlightenment. And in fact, think about this for a minute. Think about it. Let me show you a picture here from Close Encounters. See the number there in the background? That sort of gives you the idea. It's the number 33. It sort of gives you the idea of where we're going with this. The 33rd degree of Freemasonry, the ultimate, the illumination, where the all-seeing eye illuminates you. Remember, that's what we're talking about, prophets of the new order. And now we're dealing with Steven Spielberg, who no doubt in my mind received inspiration to make this and some of the other movies that he's produced. But in this movie, we have this concept. I want you to get this now. We have... And I want you to think about the 10 Commandments, because in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, they actually reference the movie 10 Commandments, sort of like in the middle here. These kids are watching the TV. Hey, Dad, 10 Commandments is on. So I want you to think about that, because in the 10 Commandments, you have the 12 tribes going to the mountain of God to receive the law of God. Well, in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, with these, big-headed aliens that Aleister Crowley dreamed up, you have 12 people who make it to not the mountain of God, but Devil's Tower. And they're going there to Devil's Tower not to receive illumination from God the Father.